Hey everybody, welcome to a new game here. This is called Dagon, and it's based on an H.P. Lovecraft story. I got this for free on Steam, so I figured this would be a fun one to try out this time of year. And I needed a short one. As you may know, October is almost over. Halloween is a few short days away. Yeah, I just wanted to get into this. If you can see on the right, they have some DLC. So if you liked this, they have other Lovecraft stories that are available as DLC. So kind of an interesting concept to take the old stories like this. Maybe they cut out the racism, I don't know. Hopefully. Anyway, let's check it out, see what this is all about. It's a faithful interactive adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's work focused on story and atmosphere. You will not find difficult choices, action sequences, or inventory management here, and movement is limited to progressing through locations along with the plot.
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more.
See what it said. Guess I have to go back to the menu and read it. Oh well, looks like it's just a little extra stuff about the story. It's supposed to be VR, but doesn't let you turn all the way around. It's kind of weak. Alright, let's go.
Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below.
Harsh.
Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
I know what morphine is.
It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider.
The packet? I was looking for secrets, man. Can't find anything. Nothing in the sky. Nothing on the deck. Alright. Moving on.
The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation. So that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners.
Huns. Yeah, I know who the Huns are. Attila the Hun. Yeah. They were mean dudes.
So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
Secrets? Nope.
When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight.
No, that almost lets you turn 360.
The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous. When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished.
It just looks like an oil spill. Not a big deal, really. Happens all the time.
For there was in the air, and in the rotting soil, a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish, and of other, less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
Dagon seems to be inspired by Fishhead, a short novel by Irvin S. Cobb about unnatural affinities between hybrid idiot and the strange fish of an isolated lake, supernatural horror in literature, H.P. Lovecraft. And Lovecraft's dream about a strange island emerging from the ocean and him crawling in the ooze that covered its surface. I dream that whole hideous crawl and yet can still feel the ooze sucking me down. Lovecraft's interest in the topic seemed from his aversion to fish and sea smells, in his own words. I've hated fish and feared the sea and everything connected with it since I was 2 years old, but I cannot recall what earlier experience gave me such a profound and lasting aversion to the sea and seafood. Yeah, at least he admits it. It's like, yeah, I take stuff I don't like and I make them scary. That's what all horror writers do, I guess.
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things. For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue. On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert.
Hummock, I guess that's a mountain. Kind of maybe the only thing that really makes sense is if it was a mountain. Anybody want some crab legs?
That night I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it.
Well, he's wrong. There is life, it's just weird. So I guess maybe he's half right. About 8,000 meters below the ocean surface, the snailfish, in never-ending darkness at hellingly crushing pressures, hundreds of times stronger than those found at sea level. Upon glancing at the modern photos of deep-sea creatures, such as the anglerfish, the fangtooth, or the viperfish, and their truly Lovecraftian characteristics, it's not hard to find some irony in this.
By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again.
Seems like something you might want to show.
And in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined.
Not much to see here.
Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me. An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself. But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express. For despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely.
Doesn't really seem like much to examine.
The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures. The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
Telling the story through carvings, journals, and characters' notes. Islands emerging from the ocean, fictional beings and deities based on real events. It's also considered the origin of the popular Cthulhu mythos. Some of Lovecraft's other stories also conclude in a manner similar to Dagon, but let's skip the details in order not to spoil the ending. Gotta be getting close.
Plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men.
Fishmen.
Though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer. They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips.
I like that method of writing. It's like, you know those really famous writers that we all know and love? Even they'd have a hard time describing what I'm trying to describe here. So it's not my failure as a writer. Every writer would have trouble and not be able to do it.
Glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born.
What about the Pickle Man?
Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it.
Where? Where is it?
With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface,
Oh boy.
the thing slid into view above the dark waters.
Here we go.
Vast, Polyphemus-like and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little.
Yeah, after playing Senwa's Sacrifice, this is definitely signs of madness. The only thing is, I'm not hearing voices, so maybe I'm not completely mad yet. Just on the outskirts of madness.
I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
Lovecraft was a prominent figure in the world of amateur journalism. In 1915, he was publishing his own journal called The Conservative, which was very racist, probably. Howard was a skilled wordsmith, but he also took criticism to heart, which encouraged his decision to step away from the writing poetry and concentrate on weird fiction again. It's like, dude, you suck at poetry. You need to write this weird crap. That's what you're good at. For the first time since his teenage years, Dagon, published in 1919, is one of the short stories written during that period. In this example excerpt from The Conservative, the master of horror explains his attitudes toward warfare and the idea of world peace. Why any sane human being can believe in the possibility of universal peace is more than the conservative can fathom. Should the entire civilized world agree simultaneously to disarm, one or more nations would undoubtedly retain secret armaments, and at the proper time take advantage of the more altruistic and less astute contemporaries in a wild career of conquest against unarmed victims. No country is or can ever be above warfare until the basic influence of the human animal shall have miraculously changed. Sounds like something a conservative would say. Anyway.
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist.
Did I miss something? Main deity of the Philistines, worshipped throughout the Middle East as ancient god of fertility and crops. In Hebrew, the word Dagon was common noun for grain. The rulers of Akkad, Mesopotamia, chose him as a patron saint of their war of conquest. He also appeared as a judge of the dead in the Assyrian poem and the underworld prison warder in one of the Babylonian texts. This is the interesting stuff. He's often mistakenly taken for a fish god due to the wrong interpretation of his name, as in Hebrew the word dag means fish. So this was all just a big misunderstanding, apparently. All of the fears. See, that's a good metaphor too. The fears came from misunderstanding. In H.P. Lovecraft's works, Dagon is an underwater deity ruling over the deep ones, a humanoid race with fish traits that reside in the oceans. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Esoteric Order of Dagon.
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
August Derleth was an American writer and anthologist. He befriended Lovecraft and published many of his works through his company Arkham House. Although they greatly contributed to the popularization of the author's works after his death, he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of his most questionable decisions involved introducing the good versus evil doctrine. Derleth was a devout Catholic to the Cthulhu mythos, which contrasted with Lovecraft's view of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's works are often misunderstood and misrepresented in today's culture. It is also worth noting that Lovecraft was never really interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulhu mythos was coined by Derleth after the author left the mortal plane. Of course, he's just writing, making up crap. People who get obsessed with it are the ones that categorize it and have the idea that everything links up, whether it does or not. was the point of walking over here? There's got to be something. Really? Nothing? You just made me walk over here pointlessly? I guess it's because I couldn't get to the door from where I was at before. Could have at least given me a trivia.
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men.
Lovecraft hated tobacco, even though he used to smoke when he was 12, in order to look and feel like an adult. That seems like something in the 1800s that 12-year-olds would do. And also, if you started smoking when you're 12, you'd probably hate it. Also, in his correspondence with a friend, Reinhard Kleiner, he claims that he quit as soon as he started wearing long pants. He also had a very strong opinion about alcohol. As evidenced in this letter. As for a matter of drinking, I've never tasted the intoxicating liquor, and never intend to. So how do you know? How do you have an opinion? Having a strong aesthetic disgust at anything which blunts or coarsens the delicate natural equipoise of the evolved human intellect and imagination. Drinking excited my personal repugnance, hence I don't drink. Let the herd do what they will. I'm rather in favor of prohibition. The prohibition of any one antisocial force as well as any other. Well, that's kind of a little hypocritical. It's like, let them do what they will, but I want prohibition, so they can't do it.
Often, I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm. A mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near.
Seems like the oceans are going to reclaim us.
I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it.
Probably should take some more morphine. What's the take morphine button?
It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window!
Starting to get the madness vision. Wallpaper kind of looks like tentacles. hope you enjoyed immersing yourself in a little pool of cosmic horror. I would appreciate it if you took a moment to check out our other games and DLCs. So yeah, like I was saying, there's more if you're interested in that. That was kind of fun. I think it was fairly well done. Maybe could have went a little harder, but you know, don't want to freak people out too bad, especially in VR. That's a cool illustration. I think the author is Jeff Vandermeer. Has kind of been good if you like kind of H.P. Lovecraft stuff, but you don't want to read stuff that's extremely outdated. And I don't think I got all the trivia. Oh dang, definitely not all the trivia. They must have been pretty well hidden. Oh, this is the one that I missed. He wrote a lot of letters. He would skip meals to afford postage. Alright. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that, and have a spooky Halloween weekend. And there's going to be a special, I'm going to do something special for Halloween. I'm going to try to tackle Splatterhouse again, but this time with save states. So hopefully I'll be able to beat it, and we'll have a special brute force Halloween edition that we haven't had for a long time since I've been playing Yakuza 0. So, anyway, yeah, thanks for joining, and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.